Hey, we're live and welcome to the next Antares Adventures, episode 5. We're talking the Ghar today. And we have a very special guest, one of my all-time favorite rules writers, Mr. Rick Priestley. Say hello, Rick.
Hello, Rick.
and Tim Bancroft as well.
Hi, guys.
Sergey and Kevin, the Tabletop Warlords.
What's up, guys?
And for some reason, not Jay.
Because 5 boxes would look weird.
I'm the filler.
Not Jay represents the brand new player in Antares to give us his questions that he, he's brand new to this. He doesn't know, a lot about the background and things like that. And that's why I like having him on and getting him into this game, because he's brand new and on this podcast. So he can ask those questions that people are wondering. So we already got people commenting. Ruben says, hello from Lincoln, UK.
What's up, Ruben?
Hello,
sir.
Ruben.
Ruben is the man.
And I can't say his name. Morzimis says, this will be nice to watch during the long bus trip. It would be. He's absolutely right. So
that's really going out of the way, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Go on a long bus trip specifically to listen to us.
Well, today we're talking Ghar, and as usual, I'd like to start it off with either Rick and Tim. You both, either one of you guys, tell us about the Ghar. Who are the Ghar? Give us kind of an intro, and then we'll lead off from there.
Shall I? Well,
did you want to start?
Yeah, I was going to say. I think Tim is our resident Ghar expert, really. When I came up with the Ghar as part of the Antares project, and I sort of envisaged them as being these rather small, degenerate little creatures that actually fought inside war machines. So they don't really. I'd never imagined them originally as having sort of much independent action on the battlefield. But being these war machines, but they grew in the telling as the story goes, and they acquired a life of their own, and Tim rather picked up on them and has used them a lot in some of his supplements. So what Ghar have now become is a little bit more like one of the prime movers in the Antarian story.
Fleshed out, isn't it?
Yeah. Fleshed out, yeah. So I think I should let Tim take up the story there.
Tim, before you do, we have an echo going on.
I don't think I've heard.
No.
Is it just in my headphones?
I think it's just in your head.
Okay.
It's okay. The Ghar.
You're hallucinating again.
It's that disruptor dice. You shouldn't draw it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's just in your head.
Right. What can we say? Here we go. Here is one of those war machines that the Ghar use. That you have to excuse my hands. They can get a little bit. Oops. There we go. That's one of the war machines. In that is a Ghar, who is a very, very small person. You can see them here in one of their other war machines, and they are actually chimeras. They were. It says here that the Ghar did not evolve naturally. They were genetically engineered using a limited selection of segments of human pattern haplotype. Rick really studied the genetics here.
Yeah, I did.
Together with numerous artificially constructed elements. And that almost certainly also includes, I don't know if you can hear me, see me still, guys.
Yes, we can.
Good, but it still includes all the things to do with combat and conflict, obedience, tactical imagination. So they're not stupid tactically, as well as basic things to do with mechanics and engineering. When they were created, though, is a bit of a mystery. Probably sometime during the First Age, which is probably around about 30,000 years ago, but we just don't know, because of the nature of Antares' time. But what they were bred with, or was bred into them, was the whole thing about killing human beings. They were bred, by the looks of things, to be part of or key components of a war against human beings. and it looks like that their makers have now died off, but they have continued with their prime. I don't know. I suppose it's an inbred. Would you say it's an inbred?
It's inbred. It is. It's inbred, isn't it? It's because they're like an army without any kind of direction
anymore.
So they only exist to fight. Yeah.
To kill humans, and that's it. And that leads to all sorts of problems, because they've come out now into the 7th age, where technology really has moved on a lot. So you've got the Imtels, so there was hyper intelligent nanosphere. You've got the New Who's, and you've also got the new space drives, which the Isauries invented during the downtime between the 6th and the 7th age. So they're now really struggling with fulfilling their purpose. And that has eventually led to them trying to breed better Ghar. I was to say hatch better Ghar, but they don't breed. They are cloned, I don't know, they're cloned, and they're dumped into vats. Basically, they're breeding hatcheries. So there are thousands of them bred at the same time in a hatchery. A bit like, as we were saying earlier, Brave New World, where you have a few of the alphas. In this case, the alphas would be the high commanders and supreme commanders. You'd have a few more of the betas, and they would be the battle troopers. You'd have a few more of the gammas, and they would be the mechanics and the engineers. And then you'd have all the Ghar below them, who are just the people who, look after waste systems, recycle metal, and that sort of stuff. So they've got a very, very strongly hierarchical society. And all the Ghar at the bottom end.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Go on.
I thought you. Didge says human and what else? Amphibian, simian?
I would imagine that it's a real mix of. It's a real chimeric. They've got huge chimeric qualities, but there's also some purely artificially created strands of DNA in there as well. So that's it. So they're bred. They're cloned in hatcheries rather than actual bred, depending on which hatchery they go to and which nutrients put into the fluid, and who was used as the template for the cloning depends on what sort of Ghar comes out at the end. And their attempts to improve themselves have come up with the horribly dysfunctional hatchery 1242, which is an attempt by them to breed Ghar who are better leaders than average, who could lead the Ghar into a new offensive against the horrendous humans.
Yeah, the great problem is imagination, isn't it? Because Ghar, imagination was bred out of Ghar at a very early stage, it being an unnecessary element in a soldier, definitely not wanted.
Yeah.
But they've discovered that in trying to breed a more sophisticated commander Ghar, they've introduced that tiny strand of imagination into the gene line, which is a dangerous and unwelcome quality in anyone, and particularly in Ghar.
I think we have a question for Rick.
In that 1240 hatchery.
Do Ghars laugh? Yeah, I imagine they do. They probably enjoy knock jokes. I can imagine it being a heavy feature of the long winter nights. What do you do?
Knock, who's there? A human. Boom.
Yes. Exactly so. Well done. Yeah. So I think that's the terrible thing, isn't it? And so with the Ghar developing a streak of imagination, there's some Ghar have just thought, wait a minute, things could be different. Things could be different. Oh, another terrible, terrible thing to think. And this has led to a whole strain of Ghar rebels who've dared to be different.
Yes, I think in this program, did you want to focus on Ghar Empire and do Ghar rebels at a different time?
Oh, we can do both if you like.
I think at the moment it's very difficult to separate them all out because the rebels arose because of this imagination Rick's been talking about, all these changes to the DNA. And then you've got the outcasts who are splits from both of those, who have been thrown out by the renegade Ghar High Commander, Karg, who's a bit of a nasty example of this 1240 batch, and his fellow broodmate, Fartok, split off, saying, no, we're the proper Ghar and we can do it better. But then Karg keeps throwing people out who don't agree with him. Which that reminds me of something, actually. I don't know what that reminds me of.
Beautiful.
So,
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite models. It's definitely the most ridiculous model in all of entire space, which is why I like it so much.
yeah, the Ghar. Is that Fartok? Sorry, I can't.
That's
Karg.
Yeah, with his slave entourage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nope,
Oh,
that's
no,
me.
that's just Sergey.
Here we go.
Yeah, I can see. That's the one, yes. So Karg's trying to be I don't know what he's trying to be there. He's trying to come across as a really important human, dominating person, except of course he
has ambitions to be the Supreme Commander, doesn't he?
Yes.
Which is another thing. Ghar are not supposed to be individually ambitious. They're supposed to subsume their personalities in order to serve Ghar. But Karg, being one of these chapters of imagination and no moral compass, has become this kind of self-serving Ghar commander.
Yeah, and his actions are, because he's got the ear of the Supreme Commander, his actions are now causing the Empire to split up in some ways, you should say. So it's a bit sad.
Oh, we're still on Sergey.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what to do. Did you see my discomfort rising? Like,
Anxiety, Sergey. It was fantastic.
So I've got a quick question.
Oh, go for it.
It sounds like the Ghar are, as a whole, a less intelligent species than, say, the Concord. They're more, from another IP, they're more orcish than they are human when it comes to intelligence level.
Yeah,
It's like kind of a Hulk smash type of grr arg. I mean, they're smart enough to do space travel, but they're kludging crap together to, get out there and hope they don't get blown out a door.
Yeah, they don't learn in the same way as people do. They've got a lot of innate understanding, but they're not open-minded. So it's a different sort of intelligence, really.
It is. It goes on a different route, and that's why in some ways they actually can maintain their own equipment and build their own equipment really quite well. But when it comes to doing anything new,
they're not very adaptable.
They struggle. Yeah, so they try to. Some of the models, for example, like like this little creeper. I don't know if you can see that, but
yeah, that's sweet.
Is a bit of a kludge of an Algorin.
Oh yeah.
I never noticed that. That's cool.
Creeper, an Algorin skimmer, and a whole bunch of Ghar parts. They regard all other technology as beyond the pale anyway. But because
it's physically sickening, isn't it?
Yes, physically sickening, and humans are physically sickening to them as well. So it makes life quite different. It's not like we can look at somebody we don't like and think, okay, well, they're shooting at me, I've got to shoot back. They'll just look at a human and without thinking about it, just shoot, and then think, oh, the guy didn't have a gun. But it doesn't matter because it was human. I think intelligence, as Rick said, it's very difficult judging them by human strands or human standards of intelligence.
It's more like a space cunning.
Yeah, base cunning probably is one way to look at it. Tactical awareness is superb, I think, given their tools, but they just run forward using their suits, or put the Ghar in their suits, plug them in, and just send them in. And their suits are really tough. I think you classed them as armored cars, didn't you, really, Rick?
Yeah, when I started, I was thinking in terms of armored cars. They ended up in the starter set. It wasn't the original intention. It was just that they were the first plastic set that got made.
Yeah.
So they ended up in the starter set. The original idea was that we would have Concorde and Isaurians in the starter set. But whoever was making the Isaurians didn't make them fast enough. And it didn't quite work out. So we were sort of pushed into that one. But yeah,
I'm glad you did, because what made me fall in love with this game,
lovely,
is the Ghar.
It's almost like a happy accident, because really the mechanics of the Ghar, it was really interesting, because like when me and Sergey first started playing, I liked the Concorde, and when I told him there was giant robot crab claw suits, he immediately wanted the Ghar. Yeah. And when you're learning Antares, the rule set is definitely complex. And I think that it was like the Ghar's mechanics, because right off the get, I was like, these guys are impossible to destroy. I was so frustrated. It really, helped organically for us to look into the mechanics of the Ghar. And then by learning how to counteract, like fighting them, it really teaches you a lot of the base elements of the game in a quick way.
It's a little bit of a hurdle, though, isn't it? As you say, when you first start playing, you definitely look at these and go, "Well, I don't see how I can beat them."
Oh yeah,
I'll
never forget when Sergey literally scooped my army out like an ice cream cone with just the Ghar command crawler. It's literally like trundling around my back line, killing every unit. All my guys are just like, ah! Terrible.
Yeah, it's a really good tutorial box. Like, so part of like video game design is you want people to encounter an obstacle that they can only defeat using a mechanic that they need to learn. And the only way to beat Ghar is by pinning Ghar out. So having a starter set that has an army that can split fire, which creates 2 pins a turn, versus an army that crumbles to 2 pins a turn being placed on them, is a really good way to teach players the importance of pinning in Antares. That's kind of how we discovered it. We were just trying to kill each other. And then all of a sudden the paradigm shifted when Kevin was like, oh, I can split fire and put 3 pins a turn on your Ghar, and now I win every time. It was a really good teaching moment. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent.
Yes, it can be. It's that whole it is often the thing people say, oh, how do I beat Ghar in the core box? And then other people say, what you need to do is this. And then you get the Ghar player saying, how do I beat the Concorde?
That was exactly me.
Yeah. He went right to a Saurian.
Yeah.
I think with some things like the command crawler were a lesson for us, because the command crawler was almost impossible to kill. Because he had the original leader rule, which meant he could re-roll all fails. And that meant that all of a sudden the chance of inflicting anything on him went from 1 in 100 to something like 1 in 1,000, which wasn't.
Kevin literally never killed my command crawler before the rules changed.
Yeah. We can bet, but that's one of the things we've changed, and our vehicles don't get that. What they do is effectively they get a reroll on the damage chart itself, and then they can choose the one they actually want. But that helps make something like the command crawler less effective, I suppose you could say. But it's still a hell of a beast, because you can actually do all sorts of things with it by using its command capabilities and its follow capabilities. And you can get things like the command crawler. One of the combos, which I think John Harrington really likes with his Ghar, is to use a command crawler really close to a one of these things.
My favorite vehicle in Antares.
Yeah, which is the heavy bombardment crawler. So he has one of the command crawlers with the heavy bombardment crawlers, and he has a munition scutter alongside it as well.
Oh.
So all of a sudden, you get the command crawler shooting at you with its scour cannon. Then you get the bombardment crawler launching its heavy bombardment disruptor bombard against you, and its disruptor cannon going on, and the munition scutter with its stuff. And then you get the bombardment crawler promptly launching another salvo of its heavy bombard on you, and you have got a whole bunch of really nasty trouble coming your way with just that first dice pulled out from the Ghar.
And I can imagine
long range too.
Yeah, very long range, yeah. And potentially with a fire order shooting at different targets.
I can imagine him in that crawler going, take that.
you have to learn to deal with it, but it's another thing. It's the whole thing about Antares is that there are ways of dealing with stuff, and that's fine. There are ways of dealing with the command crawler, which is to make it upset. Start pinning on it. Don't give it a free line of fire to somewhere, so you force the two machines to move. So, and once you start doing that, which is really what Antares is about, they start having to work hard.
Yeah, that's a lot of points in a very small place, isn't it?
Huge! Yeah, absolutely.
You really put a lot of your army in one space like that, and you're actually quite vulnerable. Yeah, potentially.
If you're trying to take objectives, a whole bunch of objectives, for example, it becomes a very difficult army to use, because you have to destroy all your enemy, because otherwise you won't win. Whereas your opponent, of course, is going to try and hide all the time and make life difficult for you, and they'll almost certainly get some of those objectives, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So it swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I can see it working. I can see it working in lots of situations. Should I forget one?
Yeah, but that's the whole point, isn't it? It's a case of the rules coming together to actually make something much more complex, even though fundamentally it seems straightforward.
Also interesting to note that the Ghar are the only people who can get good aggressive armor 13 vehicles at 750 points, which is a pretty interesting mechanic, because while you are if you're getting a command crawler at 750 points, that is a big chunk of armor or a big chunk of points. Not a lot of people are taking a battery of mag cannons at 750 points, so you don't have to worry too much about all the vehicle hate that you would see at 1,000, 1,250.
No, you don't. But you find what we found is that during the tournaments and that sort of stuff, people start taking along armor killing stuff, even at 750 or even quite young. Some of you may know Dave Richardson, of course. He loves his mag cannon because even when it's not used against people like Ghar, which is where it's best there, or other vehicles, other transports, it can be used as a sniper against almost any other units to inflict a pin and almost certainly a casualty. But against things like Ghar suits, it's fantastic. But I find that there's one of our other guys, Ant Sharman. He loves to take a Concorde. He's a Concorde player. A solid Concorde player. He loves to take a D2 drone, give it a plasma cannon and a batter shield and a spotter, and then hide it in the woods. Now, because it's not large, that means it is really well protected. It's hiding in woods. It's got a really boosted res, and he just uses it to snipe down Ghar suits, which have got res 12. So when you've got a plasma cannon firing against res 12 stuff, it takes it down to res 6, which starts making life difficult for the Ghar.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like so much about the list building processes in Antares is there are so many different threats that you have to take into consideration when you're making a list, particularly for a tournament setting where you don't know your opponent. If your army does not have an answer to Ghar, you will not do well. If your army does not have an answer to Ghar rebels, you will not do well at like kind of the two extreme ends of the elites versus fodder spectrum. So when you're building a list, you cannot build an anti-Ghar list, because then you'll lose to everybody else, and you cannot build an anti-infantry list because then you'll lose to Ghar. So it forces you to build very balanced catch-all lists, which is I think really fun and interesting as a list builder.
Well, will you see any Ghar rules or background changes in the second edition? Is Ruben's question. Wouldn't you like to know?
Well, that's why he asked the question, Matt.
Does it?
And is it just me, or is Tim gone sideways?
Oh, he's sideways.
Okay.
Chris, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Is that better?
There you go.
Okay, I might have to go upstairs because my phone keeps giving up. I will go upstairs. I'll try and join you upstairs, all right? Because my phone is not doing very well. I'll leave the showing the things to everybody at the moment.
Okay.
Oh, get a tour of Tim's house, look.
Yeah, isn't that nice? I've seen this before. Bang go the bookcases. But no, we'll now move into. Oh dear.
You're very keen on Magnolia, aren't you?
So pale crim. The trouble is, it's such a dark house that we have to have light colours everywhere. Otherwise, we can't see anything. Which is
very Concord.
A bit of a disappointment. Anyway, so what were we saying? We were talking about the Ghar. Yeah. So at the core, the Ghar are oriented around battle suits, and all their battle suits are Res 12. They're either equipped with Scourer cannons, or they are equipped with their assault claws. They're not quite called
the gouger guns and the
claws.
plasma claws, I think.
And plasma claws, yeah. And the gouger guns and plasma claws are effectively close combat weapons, and the rest are long, medium range weapons, I should say, isn't it? Mm. And that's another thing you can actually destroy the Ghar is by engaging them at longer ranges than they can actually engage you on. Hold on a minute, I'm going to transfer now, so I'll leave the studio.
And we got some more questions here. So, will there be new characters in the future? A new commander, captain, new beast? Rick?
We haven't got any planned as yet, but it's really up to it's up to Warlord to find the time to put aside to do some extra design for Antares to do that. So more often than not, what happens is Tim or I will. Tim works for Warlord, so Tim or I will get charged with coming up with something for a new model rather than the other way around.
Yes.
So often we have to find it. Sometimes they'll say something like, we want to do something new with Freeborn, or it could be Ghar or whatever, more likely to be Freeborn, and we kind of come up with something to suit. But the only times we get to do something new in terms of commanders or characters or whatever are where we're actually putting a supplement together, and then we have to negotiate because there's only so much design time.
Yeah.
If you want a big spangly character, then it'll take a bit longer and so on. And so sometimes it's we don't always get what we want. So there's nothing on the table at the moment.
Excellent.
You can always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need.
Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah, sometimes we just don't get either, which is that's a bit annoying, really.
Smoot asks, is there an answer to Rebel Ghar, really, though?
Is there an answer to Rebel Ghar, really?
Strike value.
I don't know.
Well,
They were really good. Although they nerfed the ability to take the weapons teams. Or I shouldn't say they. You guys nerfed yeah, you're in the room.
They are present.
Yeah. They are them.
Yeah.
There.
But so you can't take the weapons team without the squad anymore, which was, I think, the crux of what made them so incredibly powerful on the field. And they also nerfed the creepers, so you can't take a squad of 3 with mag cannons, which is a pretty berserk unit. So I think they're at a much more balanced level than they were. Granted, I don't have a ton of experience playing with them, but yeah, I think they're more on the level. They also buffed some other stuff, like they buffed Ghar Empire's claws and their melee capability, which I thought was a really good change.
I like the ability of they could possibly blow up on themselves.
That has screwed me out of so many damn games.
Well, that's the idea with the Ghar, is that they're old-fashioned, dirty technology. So it's almost the antithesis of the Concorde, where everything's very, very sweet, and the average starship uses the same amount of power as a hairdryer. But the Ghar is completely the opposite. It's like they've got nuclear power stations on their backs and don't care.
Yes, there's a radiation link coming from your suit. Well, all the better to kill you then.
Yes, it keeps you nice and warm, doesn't it?
What? Yes, we don't have to have heaters inside. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nor lights, because I glow naturally.
Yes.
Best Ghar quote ever, right?
I do have a
It keeps you warm, doesn't it?
Oh, sorry. The distortion technology. It says in the fiction that battlefields can be like affected by the distortion technology, and I really want to make at some point Ghar distortion themed terrain. And so when you say affect the battlefield, what was in your imagination?
Well, you've got like the potential to have spatial distorting areas. So an area which can shrink or expand, or just collapse in on itself, taking everything with it. Not sure how you do that actually on tabletop. It would be quite difficult.
You get those. You get those dinosaur sponges that you drop in.
Yeah. And it's just like it sucks up like a cat's bottom.
But that's why you get the distort dice, though. That's there to represent that distortion roiling around the battlefield and actually causing some chaos to a unit, so it dives to the ground to let this distortion roll around it and get out of the way.
Yeah, and of course it's a time distortion as well, isn't it? You can almost look at almost like areas of the battlefield that speed up or slow down or whatever. It's distorting in that sense as well. And I thought the distort dice was a good way of doing that.
Yeah, I think it works really well, but then I would.
It's a really cool mechanic.
I really liked the distort die.
Yeah. I mean that was the sort of mechanical idea that almost like drove the Ghar.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
that's actually what initially attracted me to the Ghar. I was before playing Antares, I played a lot of 40k, and I played Chaos Demons back before they were much more aligned. So it was like a very RNG, like win big or lose kind of army that had like winds of magic blowing all over the place. So I looked at the Ghar as like kind of the Antares equivalent of that, where it was like an army that you had to deal with chaos factors, which I thought was fun as a transition.
Yeah. Well, that tends to be very me, I think. I always think that when you're designing a game, human style armies tend to be all combined arms piece where everything's fairly even, and you can have armies based on troops which are intrinsically more powerful, which Ghar are, but you have to put in something that balances that. You can't just have things which are more and more powerful. I think Games Workshop operates differently these days. But, you can't have stuff that's. You can have stuff that's slightly better, elite, but the minute you go better than elite, you have to have a balancing weakness, like Superman. Mm-hmm. You have to have your kryptonite. Mm-hmm. There has to be something that balances it out, and that randomness is something which a lot of thoughtful competitive gamers really, really hate.
Yeah.
So you put that in.
But it's what makes the Ghar so fun to play. You either win big or you lose big.
Yeah.
But neither you nor your opponent know what's going to happen. Your opponents desperately trying to use all the proper tactics against them, and you can just almost do whatever you like, and then just let the dice roll.
Yeah, I think it helps if you think a little bit, but there is a chance element you can't necessarily do anything about.
Yeah,
you can kind of allow for these things, can't you? But you ultimately, if you get lucky or unlucky with the guy, you will go one way or the other, and you just have to live with that.
Yeah, I mean, as we were talking about earlier, with the Ghar just exploding, if you get a lucky hit and the plasma reactor and you fell on a 10, and effectively you could get a chain reaction as this plasma reactor just explodes and causes all the other reactors potentially to overheat. And that works really well, but it's a fun moment. I mean, Ant, who I play sometimes, has actually got a huge marker. He's got a huge pin marker, which he gives you as soon as one of your suits overheats and explodes. And it's about 5 inches tall.
He gives it to you, does he?
He gives it to you. Says, "Oh no, use my marker. Use my pin marker." Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
Kevin, do you have the plasma explosion terrain behind you? Kevin actually made something for this as well.
Oh,
cool.
lovely.
Yeah.
An explosion.
The blue ones. The blue smoke explosion.
I'll go get them.
Hey,
I think
Kevin's
do you
doing
want to answer some of those other things?
Sure.
That's some of the other questions. Ruben asked about, are there going to be background changes second edition? No, not really any changes. But Rick and I have mentioned this before, haven't we, Rick, in terms of Antares is just being tidied up more than anything else.
Sounds like
Sounds like it dropped the setting out of his ring.
And then there's Open Signal and Mini Warm-Up talking about any history. Yes, there is history of the first to sixth ages, and there's quite a lot, and there's some actually in the core rule book. But I think Rick's expanded that really quite nicely. That's a really nice plasma explosion there.
It's good, isn't it? Wow.
It doesn't flicker, but
It's glowing with radioactive goodness.
That's brilliant.
It looks like looks like an irradiated tribble.
Yeah. It
I would
does,
be
doesn't
totally
it?
down for that.
Is that what it looks like when Cookie Monster explodes?
You're right.
What else we got here? Ruben, he's asking, would Ghar and Vorel ally against Panhumans?
I don't think Ghar would ally against anyone, with anyone, really, would they? It's not a Ghar thing to do.
No.
Sounds like they wouldn't even ally with themselves if they didn't have to.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's very much. Sorry, go on, Tim.
I was just going to say, they wouldn't ally themselves, but against Vol, they may sort of like have a mutual non-combat sort of like tacit agreement, but it wouldn't be a treaty or anything else like that.
Yeah, would they care about the Vorel? Like, if their programming is kill all humans, do they even like recognize the Vorel as anything that is something interesting to them?
Yeah, we don't really know, actually, do we? We don't know what the Ghar's relationship to the Vorel is. They may be a complete mystery.
I don't think they've actually contacted the Vorel. Looking at the maps, the Ghar are actually way away from the Vorel, so they may look at the Vorel, but they certainly wouldn't just react to them. They just treat them as something else in the universe, yet another thing. If you see what I mean. So
yeah. The Ghar have been around a long time, as have Vorel, in terms of the ages of Antares. So who knows? In the past, there might have been some relationship.
Yeah,
but we haven't done that. We haven't explored that at all.
Well, there's one part of the Ghar that I absolutely love, and it's the reason why I take a whole bunch of outcasts if I can. And that is, if they fail in battle, they say, here's a crappy gun. Go run and die.
That's if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, you just get sent to the recycle and turned into food.
And that's exactly what I do with them on the battlefield. I just use them as a distraction, and they die very quickly.
Well, eat them.
It is deceptive because we had a battle. I don't think we filmed it, Sergey. I think it was
that was just a for fun battle,
which we never do ever. It's always on film. But But oh my god, his Ghar Outcast just kept encroaching on a position of a few strike squads of Concord. And man, once those guys are at close range, woo, they were just, almost more than 10 dice coming at me. So it definitely became quantity over quality, and that won the day.
Yeah, they do a lot. They are very punchy. Like, they have horrible armor and they have horrible leadership. But if you get them within 30 inches of somebody and actually get like a salvo of fire off, they can kill a lot of dudes.
Yeah.
They remind me of goblins.
They're 100.
Yeah, grots or something like that.
Yeah.
So are they more shooty or are they more
Definitely
fisty?
more. They're more shooty.
Crappy shooty.
They wear t-shirts.
So
for armor.
you, Jay,
Oh, I was about to say, hey, I'm wearing a t-shirt. What do you mean?
the distortion technology. So the Ghar have access. A lot of the Ghar, their weapons have many different firing modes, and the one that is Sergei's favorite because it is incredibly effective is most of their units have some form of like a distortion bomb, and whereas normally attacks just add a single pin, all distortion weapons add 2 pins. So it's not necessarily that they're shooty, like Sergei said, in like the accurate sense. It's more of like I have an arm full of radioactive bombs and I'm gonna set it to 11.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
They're a very pin oriented army. Like when you're trying to win with Ghar, more often like you're never gonna kill a tank, but you are gonna pin out a tank in like one turn if you have a bunch of plasma amped Ghar shooting bombs at them. So they kind of circumvent armor and other things. They're like a sidewinder kind of army with how they kill things.
Excellent.
Cool.
And Ruben says, plasma explosion.
Well, he knows.
Yes, it's worth. I don't know if you want. We can go on about the history and the background, all the rest of it. But the other units are, as you said, we've briefly mentioned the command crawler and how pokey that is, and it's got 2 Scourer cannons. It's got command and follow and all the rest of it. It can inspire the army, especially if it's got a high commander in it who can look after the outcasts. And then you've got the bombardment crawler, which is another big machine, which is mobile artillery. But you've also got these little things called scutters.
Love scutters.
I don't have any scutters, sorry.
which are used for all sorts of different purposes. One of them is just a personal transport. They're also used for freight transport if they can. You can just sling bags over them, whatever. But they're also used for munitions, so they can load a bombardment crawler or anybody else who might have run out of munitions. That's including outcasts who regularly run out of ammunition because they're sometimes not even given any. And the scutters are sort of like the backbone of the logistics core of the Ghar, I suppose you could say. And then the other vehicle which you actually have is the grabber, which repairs other Ghar who are lying around, who are knocked out. So it gives them a few bonuses for getting over bad terrain, or it gives them a few bonuses for repairing themselves and that sort of stuff.
It's like the Ghar gravity gun.
Yeah.
We haven't actually mentioned though the probably the most popular Ghar unit, who is tech terrorists.
Oh yeah, my favorite.
Tech terrorist.
Clarence, tech terrorist extraordinaire. He's our fan favorite model.
Yeah, we had some issues with Tetris very, very early on because they were a last minute late addition, unfortunately, and with their classed as infantry probe units. But then people found out you could do all sorts of interesting rules twists with.
I remember that because I was reading
it, which wasn't independent at all, was it, Rick? It was
No, it was shows you how innovative gamers can be, really.
It does.
I dream of a day where you guys finally release a Tectorus character model that still counts as infantry and can charge.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, he'd be infantry.
Ghar with a screw loose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you give him like a just a pickaxe and let him charge things while he's tectoring them.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
a particularly upset Ghar. I mean, he'd probably make very good as a similar one to Nook 27.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
I would run that in every game I ever played.
Yeah.
So-
The Tetris are really useful because they act as a mixture of spotters and targeters. So they detect enemies and then they send off the information to the Ghar combat net, and everybody's combat array says, "Oh, enemy here." So they give bonuses to enemy they see within 15 inches. Tetris are very often shot at more than spotters or targeters or anything else. Tetrists are targets. If anybody's got a spare gun going, they shoot a Tetrist because they are just too useful.
They're incredibly points effective. If you compare them to like a spotter drone, which is 10 points to add to a unit, a Tectorist is 20 points to add a spotter drone to pretty much every single unit in your army. They're good.
Yeah. They've got 60-inch wide bubble approximately if you do it well. So it goes right across the table. So it's pretty good. But of course they are vulnerable because you know they're still ultimately over only res 4, and whilst they get a reroll on that, they're still only res 4, which is if you do manage to shoot them, they can't go down, of course. So if you do manage to shoot them, they're out the window. And then you get things like flitters and flitter bombs. How did flitter bombs come into being, Rick?
I think it's just someone suggested, wouldn't it be good if these exploded? So
Isn't that how all bombs came about?
yes, well, they weren't bombs originally; they were just flitters. You see, they were like a probe type unit. So yeah, there you go.
And then we moved into the Outcasts, which is probably the origin of many Warwats' question, really, about Outcasts. Because Outcasts they're the people who just fell out of favor during Ghar life. They did something wrong, or they broke a rule, or they weren't up to scratch. They just get given a
Yes,
lucky
they
gun.
failed.
Yeah, they failed. You
That's
have
what I
not
love about
succeeded.
Mhm.
And you go into battle, and then if you're lucky, the quartermaster remembers to give them a couple of clips of ammunition on the way out the door. So they're great units as sort of like speed bumps, but they can really surprise people if, as the guy said, they get up close. But then the next thing, I think, going on from that, I think you have to move on to the Outcast Rebels as an army, because they are basically outcasts who got gathered together by Fartok, who's one of these 1240 leaders, these imaginative leaders. And he said, tell you what, we're running short of kit and equipment. Why don't we just use some of the Algarin kit and equipment or Concord kit and equipment and merge it into our own use? So the rebels were born. That is an outcast slave master. Yes. Boo! And the rebels were born, and the outcast rebels. I don't know if you've got any outcast rebels there. You just getting them?
Kevin's got some in his background. Yeah. Very well painted.
We got. Oh, let me see if I can.
I'm jealous of Kevin's Ghar scheme. I like it a lot.
I wanted them to be super irradiated, so they're green.
Yeah.
We got one with a mag gun. So it's the Algren. I'm having a hard time with the opposites here. There we go. Mag gun. We got plasma carbine, fresh from a dead Concord, no doubt. Actually, that's Algren.
It's Algren carbine. Yeah.
There we go. This one's stole from Concord. The
plasma lance. Yeah.
Plasma lance. The Blackguard are so cool in that sense too, because even more so, freaking Micro X launcher. They're armed to the teeth, and that's really cool about them, is that they literally have access to like all the different guns in Antares space, which is sweet.
Yeah, they were meant as a horde army, weren't they, Rick?
Yeah, because they're if you think about it, the Ghar Empire, the main Ghar army, is armored cars and really crappy infantry. And when we came to do the rebels, the idea was we just take away the armored cars, so you just have lots and lots of crappy infantry.
So it sounds like 1930s Spain.
Yeah, a bit like that. It's a bit like a Russian army in some ways, because I have a Russian army for bolt action, and you get the penal battalions, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Which
When the
Can you
guards
say that? Can you say that on
gun.
live shows?
penal battalion.
Penal?
I'm sure you can. I can't remember the Russian name for them. It'll come to me. Yeah, but yes, the Ghar are what you might call a horde army.
Yeah, I mean I think that's the background to Many Warmat's question, which was there was a way to game the Ghar, the Outcast rebels, so that you could have something like a 1,000-point army with something like 16 to 24 dice, and you could never beat it because half the dice could be off the table in the form of weapon teams, and the rest, so you could never break the army at all. But the rest was actually a really tough core.
Yeah,
but we've, as I said, we've introduced some rules changes at the games days to say, that's not the way Ghar work really. The idea was that for the Ghar, they'd add a weapons team to a infantry, one of their rubbishy infantry units, to actually bolster up that infantry unit, at least give it a chance on the battlefield, not as a whole bunch of differently operating separate units, because I think that they'd all feel a little bit exposed.
Yeah, I think that's one of those cases where we were trying to accommodate the way the models were sold in the army lists.
Yeah,
because and that's so we did them as separate entries, and in retrospect, you face this problem with army lists, don't you? Sometimes you want the army list to work as an army, but at the same time you want somebody to be able to buy the thing. Otherwise, it's just a pain. And I think that's where we got caught a bit with that one, or rather, I did.
Yeah, I mean it happens, but so the idea is now that you can actually run with, or try to encourage people to run with slightly larger units, but you don't get that huge break in order dice.
I think
Which
that's scary.
I think suits the Outcasts, suits the Ghar mentality a bit better. There are lots of us swarming towards you rather than a few elite specialists, unless those elite specialists are in the battle suits.
My son took a unit of assault, a unit of regular battle suits, and then the rest were outcasts. He purposely made me buy 3 boxes of outcasts because he just wanted to run a ton of outcasts. And I'm like, oh,
love it.
No problem, buddy. I'll do that. You destroyed me.
You know why?
Yeah.
But you then have to paint them all as well, don't you? So that's the thing about these sort of horde armies. You have to develop a fast painting technique.
Yeah.
Well, we learned how to do that last night.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
You know why he destroyed you?
Yeah. Well, why?
He has no soul.
Yeah. My son played one game with Not Jay, completely destroyed him. And ever he says, "You have no soul," and he dropped the mic and he was out of here.
Nah, he's a good kid. I like him.
He's been playing. I think his first experience was Rogue Trader. I think it was because I pulled out School 40K. Oh yeah, and then we it was 7th edition or something like that. But I've introduced him to every game since he was 7 years old.
Right.
So now he's better than me at So he's like making a Ghar list as soon as he got here yesterday, and they're sitting laid out here behind me, and I'm like, wait a minute, you're taking 2 units of what? You're taking 2 4-man units of battle suits?
Yeah, not good. That's one of the things that's actually really quite nice. Whilst we've got the points values and we've got the lists to actually try and give some form of structure and some form of balance to competition games, it's really quite often I don't necessarily use the lists. And I don't know how much you use the lists as well, Rick.
I don't.
Me? I don't use the list at all. All points values, as well as we well know. No, I just tend to create scenarios and use forces which I think are appropriate for the game.
Yeah,
And I do that in every game. I don't use points values for anything.
yeah, and it works in narrative games though, and that's one thing which is really quite
sort
important.
of games. You can't. I mostly play war games against the Perry twins. You can't get the Perrys to use an army list. I don't think they. You ask them to add up points values, you'd be thrown out on your ear. No, absolutely not. No, I haven't used. I mean, I have to construct points value systems for games that I publish because people expect them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the only reason I do them.
Well, now Jay and I both are very narrative and story driven war gamers for sure.
Yeah.
And I cannot. We use it as kind of like if we've never played the game before, we'll take a look at the point list right quick.
Sure.
But after that, we just take whatever we want.
Yeah, I think that's fair. If you play with an umpire as well, like a third party, which I would normally do in my normal gaming routines, usually somebody will put on a game, and that person won't necessarily play, or they'll take a very minor role, or a third hand, as it were.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I do that all the time.
Yeah. So it helps along a lot.
Yeah, Kevin used to umpire our Necromunda games all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that way the game tells a story, and that becomes way more interesting than the actual rules themselves. The rules, sort of, hopefully, if you've got them in your head, will disappear, and the thing becomes a story, and that's much more fun.
I just did a poll on the Intel Facebook group because me and Sergey are working on season 2 of all of our battle reports, and I'm just gauging what people generally speaking like. And when it was a narrative versus slugfest, it was literally more than 2/3 of the people said narrative's the way to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because when it comes down to actual competition or tournament style gaming, it is the other way around. And as a games author, you have to kind of straddle both camps to some extent. And with the new edition of Antares that Tim have been working on. I mean, Tim's done a fantastic job of putting together a whole new set of army lists, which are a benefit from the experience we've had running campaigns and tournaments and competitions. But it's not my favourite way of playing games. I can do it if pushed.
But that's reflected in the way the rules are, and that's where the Ghar really fit into it. The Ghar are they're a narrative-driven army in itself. Never mind about anything else. They're on the table because of a particular reason. They've got these really odd battle suits because of a particular reason. They've got these crubby little outcasts because of a particular reason, and there's this constant narrative going behind it. And even though they may have some objectives, every human they kill is actually a sort of little flag waver for their opponent. It's very off-putting when they do that, I have to say. But
my son wanted me to
drives them so much.
My son wanted me to make a new red mark on the battle suits for every time they killed one of my Concord. And I said, if you want that, you're going to have to pick up a brush and do it yourself. What were you saying, Kevin?
I said that would be sweet. That would be a cool idea.
Right? So every time one kills them, they put a red mark somewhere, and then they end up with, oh, well, you know what? Here, I can show you guys. Hang on. So every red mark on this Ghar right here, the slashes, is a kill.
Right, okay.
You see, and when he wise it off, hang on.
Yeah.
When he wise it off, that's another kill.
So cool.
Nice.
So he has 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kills. Oh, wait, there's another one on the back. Oh, 9, 10, 11. So every time they kill one, they get another red mark, and that was his idea. So,
that's awesome.
And he picked up a brush, he put in red paint, he slashed it on there, and he goes, "There you go, Dad."
That's what's up.
I mean, it's lovely seeing people do that to their Ghar armies, and you can see people invent backgrounds for their Ghar armies, invent their force commanders, and for rebels or empire or exiles, and for me, it's a great illustration that the game is working at that narrative level at which it works best.
Mm-hmm.
But it was such a great idea to invent that story behind that batch of leaders and only describe a few, because it really just it opens up for everybody to invent their own quirky commander with some kind of human aspect to it that is like not what someone else has done.
It's a key way when you're doing world building that you give a really good example of something, perhaps the one that most people will use, but then you open the door. So every example is an open door for you to invent something else in. You don't define it absolutely. You open the door and provide the good example. So you can. I did the same thing with Space Marines many years ago. I said, there are 1,000 chapters of Space Marines, and here are some. But you can invent your own.
Oh yeah. Even like invent your own Ghar. Even the Bormites. I don't want to dig into that, but my Bormites, I mean, they're the cool cats, man. They have all this
cool cats, man.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
They have all these beat up machines and this frag borer that I painted last night.
Cool.
It's all heavily damaged, and I mean, you can see that on the Intel. And they're like, why replace it, man? That's work.
Cuts this poor might like clicking his fingers, like.
And I even have on order some berets to put on top of these guys. So we're going to experiment with some berets. Pete says, "Where's Rick?
How much? Here's a question for you, Rick, if that's okay. How much was the something like the attack crawler driven really by the studio saying we want to do something cool with this rather than a background to the
attack crawler?
rebels?
I think it was more a question of how can we make this model work more hard, wasn't it?
Okay.
It's like, well, if we do a crawler, can we do a conversion of the crawler? A command crawler, attack crawler. So we had to have something that fitted into that vehicle slot, crawler.
Yeah.
But then how can we make iterations of it without? So we had sales codes without doing an awful lot of work.
Right.
It tends to be a bit like that. And then sometimes what will happen is the sales guys will say, well, we'd quite like, we think there ought to be another type of vehicle or another type of troop type or some elite troop, because it'll help us to sell such and such. And you go, really? You think so? Okay. And we end up having our arms twisted up our backs, and we come up with things that kind of extend the game out a little bit. So a lot of it is commercially driven, but you try and do your best with it, don't you?
Absolutely.
I mean, you and I have both been sort of in that position a few times with the supplements. I think with the Viri in particular. I mean, do you remember when we talked about the Viri? Initially, you and I got together, and I said, right, well, we know that the studio can only do so much work, so we'll create a very narrow range of Viri. There'll only be like 3 basic types, These. And then when they got the studio halfway through, got back to us and said, "Oh, we think there ought to be loads more," So
yes, there was supposed to be very, very few types of Viri indeed, and then all of a sudden they just expanded with loads of different heads, loads of different arms and whatever. And don't get me wrong, there's the arms on those constructor Viris and the different variations they've got on them are fantastic.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yes, well, it's great having the opportunity to be able to expand an idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it was a bit of a surprise.
It was, and you then have to go back to the table and do a lot of playtesting to make sure things work.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If you conceive of something in one way, and then you're halfway through, you've got it playtested and it works all right, and then somebody comes back and says, "Yes, but we want more of it," you have to kind of like extend the idea out a little bit, and sometimes you don't get the opportunity to playtest that so thoroughly. Such is life.
But the good thing is that the army lists are online now, which is, I think, been a real saving grace and really helpful.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I love the fact that they're updated so often as well. It's nice to have those little balance patches.
Yes, and we haven't done much this year, of course, but that's because of a of a certain little virus, isn't it?
Yes, nobody's done all that much this year.
Yeah.
No.
Well, we got 15 people watching. You guys pop your questions in there for Rick and Tim, and anything Antares. This doesn't have to be Ghar. We can answer other things
Okay,
as well.
I got a question for Rick.
Go for it.
What was the impetus to creating the Gates of Antares?
Yeah, it's thanks for that. The thing was, I really played a lot of science fiction games when I was in my teens, late teens, and fantasy, and the two mixed up quite a lot. And when I got out of college, and I did a degree in archaeology, so obviously I was unemployable.
Kind of like my geography degree.
Yeah, a bit like that. Ruben, if he's still there, will understand. Ruben's an archaeologist, so I was sort of stuck for earning a living. So I started a sculptor actually. I started sculpting figures, but eventually that failed. So I say failed. I made lots of figures, but I didn't make very much money. So I basically got a job at Citadel, which was right on my doorstep actually, and I knew the people there. And very quickly, I got into the whole Warhammer thing, and then we developed 40k. Well, having done the science fiction version of Warhammer, i.e. 40k, in 1987, we then exploited the bejesus out of that for another 25 years. So I never got another chance to do anything else with science fiction, because you go, let's do another game that isn't 40k. No, it was never going to happen, was it? I mean, to some extent, Necromunda was that, but
Best game ever.
Yeah, that was me and Kevin's. That was our love, was Necromunda.
Well, Necromunda is basically a Wild West game. It's
awesome.
It's a Wild West in space game, really.
Yeah.
You, Rick.
Yeah. Well, so when I got when I left Games Workshop, I thought, you know what? Wouldn't it be great if I actually got an opportunity to do another to scratch that particular itch? That's something different with science fiction, and it had to be everything that Warhammer wasn't.
Thank God.
It is.
I mean, because I'd done Warhammer 40k, I'd been through that whole, it's demons in space. It's kind of it's black magic and sorcery is real. It's kind of it's a demon-driven gothic universe. And I just didn't want to do anything again. I think if I'd done something like that again, it would have been way, way more successful commercially. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It was no way I was going to put myself through that particular ringer again. Mm-hmm. So I kind of started rereading a lot of old science fiction, more technically driven science fiction, and I discovered some new modern authors, or ones that I'd previously missed. And Tim put me onto a few, which I've read, and I kind of developed the idea of doing something that was much more of a technical, hard. I say hard science fiction, but it's not really hard science fiction, because I don't think the Antarian sort of interdimensional engine has really got any basis in real physics. We try, but
it's more so like a harder space opera.
Yeah. Space opera is what it's closest to, really.
But with a harder edge to it.
Yeah, slightly more modern edge than the classic sort of E. Doc Smith space opera, for example.
I read a lot of Piers Anthony, and it reminds me of Piers Anthony quite a bit as far as his science fiction and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, I can directly attribute what I am doing right now to you, Rick. It's your fault.
Sorry. Sorry, not Jay.
Christmas of 1988, my brother asked for and received the Rogue Trader book, box of the RB
Beakies?
01,
Space
Beaky
Marines.
Marines, and the 3 box or the 3 Rhino box, and just a fistful of lead space pirates, and that sent us careening down the gaming pathway. We dabbled a little. We dipped our foot in earlier than that, but yeah, 88 was the watershed moment, and here I am with literally. If I talked about all of if I added everything up, I seriously have probably over the last 30 plus years, $25,000 worth of gaming stuff that I still have. I don't sell anything. I don't trade anything. I don't give anything away.
You hoard it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do the same thing.
Storage unit hoarding.
Right. Well,
an entire basement full, and not only is my stuff here, but my brother's stuff is here.
This is all those. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. You know what the last thing I painted was? Some Hinchcliffe.
Holy mackerel!
Wow.
Ox carts that I obtained probably 45 years ago and never got around to painting.
We
here too. Go ahead.
We still have some of those original space pirates unpainted. Just never got around to it.
Yeah, I've painted a lot of things. So somebody, Morzimus was asking if it was true if I couldn't make a science fiction game after leaving Games Workshop. For a year. It was actually a year when I left Games Workshop. I was I couldn't work commercially in anything that was comparable or deemed competition for a year. That was a part of my contract. So I didn't. But
says Antares seems to be more of Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica kind of feel. True sci-fi.
Yeah, I'll say it's true sci-fi. Not sure about all those other things.
I find Antares more sci-fi than 40K myself.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, 40K isn't science fiction. It's really a sort of fantasy in space, or a sort of grand vision of a fantasy universe.
Space fantasy, really.
Yeah,
it is. Well, it's because it's got that whole chaos thing going off, which is a kind of parallel spiritual world. So it's it's not, and it's deliberately that. It was. Yeah, and it kind of works. It's
done very well.
It's done all right for a Games Workshop. They seem to be still flogging it.
Yeah, it's I think it's just a fad.
I think you're probably right. I can't see it lasting. Have you seen their share? Have you seen the Games Workshop share price? It's ridiculous.
1,600-pound gorilla in the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pete F. Hamilton, his series of books were very Antarian Concord. So
who?
Pete
F. Hamilton.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if that author.
Man, I love the 80s sci-fi opera vibe. Gates.
Yeah, well, that's not deliberate. That's just me.
Pete here has a good question. We understand that games these days are a combination of style, substance, and commercial realities. What interests Rick when he wants to have a game, and is it the game or setting a theme?
No, it's the people I'm playing with. It's I tend to develop games around people I know. So it's the enthusiasms of my friends that tend to sort of fire me up, and because I like designing games, it's kind of my thing. So invariably, what'll happen is, if I get invited around to play a game of we're actually in the middle of an American Civil War campaign at the moment. We've been in the middle of it since this lockdown started, which is it's a sort of a recreation of Gettysburg. The whole sort of Gettysburg campaign, but that's played with black powder rules. So invariably, I get invited along because that way other people don't have to worry too much about having to learn the black powder rules. Okay, oh, does it work like this, Rick? And I look and I go, I wish I could remember. Oh, yes, that's how it works.
Yeah, sure, why not?
I just love it.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
that Black Powder series because I'm a huge, which is funny. You mentioned American Civil War. I'm an ECW English Civil War fan. I love the English Civil War, and Pike and Shot's one of my favorite games to play. I've played other ones, but it just doesn't have the mass of miniatures in the other games like Pike and Shot does. Just reeling that back to Antares. Did you have an original like set amount of figures that you wanted per squad per se when you designed the game, or was it like, okay, here's the standard, we just have to follow that, like 5 guys move on?
Yeah. Well, bear in mind, Antares uses a lot of the bolt action mechanics.
Yes.
So it was I converted the mechanics over to a D10 system, so there's a lot of detail changes, but the core overview and the way the game plays was based on bolt action. So what I had in mind was the same sort of size games as we were playing with bolt action, which were probably what I don't know. They're probably not quite as big as people do play bolt action these days, but let's say 30, 40 figures aside, 1 or 2 vehicles, maybe 1 or 2 support weapons, that sort of size. I think invariably what happens is gamers tend to play bigger games than games designers design them for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they want to get all their toys out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with toys
exactly.
That is so true. Now, Jay, you want to? You came over to play Antares for the first time with Todd and your brother, not Jay. How many armies were on the table?
We had 4 armies, and I think they were at least 1,000 points each.
How big is this table?
Oh, it's here. I'll show you.
It's like
a black powder style size table.
it's about 13 hectares.
Let me get my camera switched to the table here. All right, as you can see right here, if I can move the camera, that is the table right there.
That's a fair size, isn't it?
This is 2 4x6s put together. So
Yeah.
6x8.
Yeah.
And then a nice little fantasy tower I built over here. I have some not Stonehenge here.
Oh yeah, quite realistic, isn't it?
Foam hinge.
Oh, I call it Lonehenge actually. But a little sacrificial tower. It's got these 3 ladies that I don't want to show up close because
We don't want to. You don't frighten folk.
Over here, I have a 4x4 board that I made originally for Test of Honor, but it's got all my English Civil War stuff on it right there. And I've got the ledge where you put your drinks and things, so you don't put it on the table. So there you go. That is what I have. And if I can get the camera back where it was, so it doesn't fall over, there we go. All right, good deal. That is my table. And I originally constructed it for American War of Independence until I found out how much it takes to paint all of those miniatures. So I switched to 10 mil. It was a lot easier.
Yeah, and 10 mil is a great scale actually for those kind of big sweeping battles. I've got quite a lot of 10 mil armies. But for science fiction, I do prefer something a bit bigger. Yeah.
And I do. And I tell you what, I played lots of bolt action on this table. And I just a little sidebar to the bolt action talk. I added the reactions to bolt action.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you, I was like, I had so many people when I started playing bolt action. What? I can't react to that? You just shoot at me? And then when I started looking at Antares, I go, oh my gosh, I'm going to put these in bolt action. And for large games, it works wonderfully. And, smaller games, tight knit, it still does work for bolt action. But I don't know, it's something about the D10.
Yeah,
that I wish bolt action was. But
some of the ideas that I used in Antares were ideas that Alessio and I talked about for bolt action, but which frightened Alessio. Because Alessio is quite a he's a very profound games designer. He says, "Oh, that rule, that's loose. That could give you problems, and it will certainly give you developmental problems." Well, I tend to go, "Yeah, but don't worry about it. It's great fun." And Alessio will go, "No, competition gamers will exploit this." he's quite tight. It's not that he doesn't understand the narrative. So I mean, he's very he's very talented in all those respects, but he'll be careful where I'll be quite rash. And sometimes my rash games design, this will be great fun. Yes, I can see this working. It does become exploitable. And Alessio, whenever these rules are exposed in Bolt Action, he always refers to them as Rick rules for this very reason. Yeah. Oh, that's a Rick rule, that is. Yeah, it throws me under the bus, in other words. But a lot of the ideas that I put into Antares were those ideas, including the multiple order dice sort of concept, things like that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, oh my gosh, this is the way it should have been. I'm a fan of Rick rules.
Yeah, well, that's why. It's because they don't quite. They're a little. There are the other things, they tend to throw up situations when you write other special rules, because it's not that you have to write a special rule to accommodate the normal flow of play. You now have to make sure that special rule works with every single possible reaction, and it can be. It can sometimes give you issues.
Oh, and I just personally, the way I like the game is I like those unexpected twists and turns. In a war game where you talk about it for days, and then a year later, I finally beat the command crawler. Fight it, sir. I mean, you're on.
Except I haven't, Matt. Thanks for bringing up a sore subject.
But those great swings in games, even if you lost, you still remember it. And that's what I like about rules like that is, if it gets too static, you're like, oh, well, that was cool. That was neat. Those you will remember what is it? The plasma nuclear power packs on the back of the Ghar battlesuit blowing up.
Yeah, it's just blowing up. Yes, that's big.
Who cares? Because it's just funny.
Mm-hmm. That's why I like that there's so many narrative campaigns with Antares. Like, I think probably me and Kevin's most memorable fights on our channel were the Raiders of Bronvar, where the entire campaign came down to who pulled the last order die on the last turn of the last game of the campaign. And I won by literally, I think I had to roll a 4 to get out of this situation, or I lost the campaign and I rolled the 4. And I was like, yeah! I think Kevin lost like 4 years off of his life with that one die roll.
My commander was literally like this far away from the commander I had to kill. Like,
I ran behind a rock and hid.
That's balance. That is.
Yeah. The Antares is actually like one of the more balanced war games I've played, and I think it's partially because you guys do release rules updates whenever something is seeming a little broken on the stage, and I really like that. We haven't encountered anything that's insane yet,
and we have a Tim.
Yeah, no, Tim is very good at his job.
Yeah,
everybody should have a Tim.
So one thing I've noticed,
just all those. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
No, I was just going to say, when we have any of these, when any of the rules things are raised, and they come up from all over the place, and sometimes they'll just crop up, and Rick and I will just discuss them, and then we'll just put them on the side just to see if anybody else comes up, or if it's just because I play with a few particularly how should we say, rules aware players. That's
how Kevin describes me all
way
the
of
time.
putting it.
Yeah, except he usually calls me a power gaming douchebag.
But is he wrong?
No, he's not wrong.
But so we'll think about it and mull over it, and we'll try out various of the issues that come up. So there's every time we have an amendment, there's a lot of playtesting which actually goes into them. Which works, and I think it's really great that Warlord are actually quite happy with us publishing these free rules amendments. That's really helped keep the rules alive, I think.
It has. It's actually it's important to get amendments right, because the worst thing that can happen is when, as a rules writer, you think you've written something that's perfect, so your child is entirely perfect, and somebody points out there's a mistake or something's exploitable or it's plain wrong, and it's very easy to panic and go, "Oh my God, what horrible blemish is this? Let's put it," and just publish something that is a patch rule or something, without necessarily following through the implications. The best thing is just to sort of step back and go, yeah, okay, let's just take that on board and let's think about it.
Yeah.
So feedback's great, but sometimes you don't want to react to it quickly. You have to go, whoa, let's have a look, because sometimes the cure can be worse than the problem itself.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, something we find, for example, is that some players, for example, made a few comments about a particular type of conflict, always going one particular way and always coming up with a problem. And Rick and I couldn't work out head nor tail why it was always a problem and why people were always getting bogged down. And it turned out that either they weren't using much terrain at all, so everybody's running around in the open and just saying, shoot me, or they're just not actually using any of the scenarios or any of the objective-based scenarios. So they're just using a shoot-'em-up game.
Yeah.
And if you look actually in the core rules, Rick originally wrote in there, this could get quite boring if you just use this one scenario all the time. Is Antares a narrative game? So it's stuff like that you've always got to check up on.
Yeah, you never know what other people are doing, but you can't stand over their shoulder and watch them.
No.
So sometimes they can be making a fundamental mistake, but they don't know they're making that mistake. So all the feedback you're getting isn't really valid, but you've no way of checking it.
Mm.
So you do have to take these things with a pinch of salt sometimes.
Well, yeah, I've definitely have boosted my terrain as far as Antares goes. Of course, I only have one type. I actually finally got some Boromite buildings from Sarissa, which I'm going to put on bases and things like that, and use them. But I'm making a mouth or head of a Boromite that's embedded in rock that they're mining out of.
Cool.
I thought that was a wonderful idea, and I'm going to come up with some sort of rules for it. They can go hide in the tunnel or something.
Yeah,
Cool.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea, except for that poor Boromite in the rock.
Yeah.
Well, it's very large Boromite. It's the cool cat supreme that grew to be 70 meters tall. There you go.
Yeah, me and Kevin have actually we've adopted this rule to every single war game that we play. That we don't do the setup where like you place a piece of terrain, I place a piece of terrain. We set up the table beforehand and we make it mirrored. So every deployment zone kind of has the same stuff, and it's just designed to be fun and look pretty on the table, and then we play from that. Because otherwise, we always feel like we're getting these boards that don't look natural or don't look.
Well, you end up with like a building, and then Sergey's like, "Screw you," and puts a marsh next to it, and then I'm like, "Put a mountain over here," and then he's like, "Screw you," and puts a marsh next to it. And it's like, we're fighting over a battlefield where some weird hermit is like living out in the middle of this terrible spot that it would be horrible to get around, and it's just weird. Yeah, so we've all and Antares, I mean, it really lends well to having a decent amount of terrain on the field. So it's cool to be able to thematically design a battlefield rather than, because you can use that back and forth rule, and that's a part of the tactics, of course. But at the same time, it's just kind of more fun that way.
Mm-hmm. We like a narrative board, a competitive game and a narrative board.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think actually building the terrain and the scene you're going to play over is almost like the key thing in any war game. It's much more. it's why I hate to see those games where you've just got, there's somebody's plonked down the building, somebody's plonked down the marsh next to it. I'm looking at you, Sergi. And someone's looking, someone's plonked down another thing. It's just, they just look like it's been scattered all over randomly, rather than it actually being a place that could have existed. And I'm quite lucky, really, in that most of the people, all the people I play are really great scenic modelers. Me, not so much, but I've got a fairly good setup. But I think the people I play, they put more into the look of the tables than they do the actual gameplay in many ways.
Oh yeah.
I think that's important. It helps with your immersion.
Yeah.
That's
one thing. We Nache and I have had the ramble on this one time, is the story and the immersion into the game, and it's important to a point. If you take too much time, like you were saying, worrying about what the terrain looks like on the table, you're not so much worrying about the gameplay or the game you're playing. So I take it to a point where I create around 10 pieces. One's got to be something rock, one's got to be something water, and the rest can be whatever. And I like those narrative pieces that, okay, you remember, I don't know if you guys saw it, but I 3D printed these big lotus looking scary plants. And then I painted them up and put them in a water piece. And, it's a narrative terrain. I think I have it right here. I can show it to you guys.
Yeah, you get too close to it, you have to roll dice to see if you get eaten.
Yeah, that's it. That's all it is. It's a simple roll. A simple rule. I just said, okay, these are man or other eating plants that just gobble up organic or metal or anything. It doesn't matter. And they're sitting in a little pond. It's actually buried underneath my table right now. I should have grabbed it out, but
never mind.
Simple rule. If you roll 1 to 5, nothing happens.
It's that classic sort of almost a Star Trek or a Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea kind of scenario, isn't it? If you go too near that strange looking plant, it's going to squirt you with something unpleasant, which will dissolve you or take your brain over or something, send you to sleep.
Well, I have so many Concord because I bought like 4 starter sets when this first came out, thinking, oh, hey, I need 4 because that's going to be enough miniatures to do this. Well, I had enough for probably about 10 people to play, but I took some of the Concord and I put them in little messed up positions, some green stuff, and all you can see is 2 feet coming out of the center plant and that terrain piece of Concord legs, and then there's some Algren legs coming out, or he's got his hand straight up, the Algren hand straight up, like help me, in another one. So, mine's very story for sure.
I'm absolutely going to unabashedly copy you. That's a great idea. I just thought about it. I was like, that hand is perfect.
and Kevin, I'll even send you a picture of it, man, so you can kind of get an idea. And it's just
oh, sorry.
No, you're good. It's just a big piece of MDF, and you put that out in the middle, and it's orange blossoms and these big giant orange blossoms, and you see these 2 little guys. One of them saying "help."
No, I've been designing me and Sergei's setting the arboreal moon of Omega Viridi. I love terrain so much that I kind of have been trying to expand on the list of terrain in the core rulebook. And then I'm trying to also create a random I love Necromundo, Rick, best game ever. But a lot of my ideas came from that sense of it's fantastic.
Me and Kevin play so much Necromundo.
I love it. But I'm trying to make like a random generated roll for each basic area terrain. Like if you got a forest, but then it might contain, such and such poison plant, or I think I did chameleon ferns, so it's harder to see your tree. But like just a bunch of stuff like that, because I love that aspect of terrain.
Yeah, I think I did go a bit overboard when I did the terrain originally in Antares.
I don't think so at all. I love the terrain in Antares.
But that's the thing. That's the feedback we've got there. You've got people who sit there and say you went overboard, but you've got another load of people who say, "Oh, yeah, but you've got so much different terrain; it's superb."
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we had to bear in mind, of course, when doing version 2, is to try and cope with both sets of opinions.
Well, we just represented it, didn't we? We ended up presenting a more accessible version throughout the core rules, and then putting all the all the detail back in a separate section.
Yeah.
So you've kind of got both. You can play a slightly more accessible version of the game with the core terrain types, or just go completely mad.
Brings me to Ruben here. He says, "Tim, Rick, please let us know something about Antares Second Edition."
Oh, I just have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man, great answer. It's the people. I think that was a reference to what we were talking. Mini Warmont says, "When is the release of Sword and Cipher Book?" I don't know what that's.
I don't know what that is.
That's another piece of fiction that I am going through at the moment. Brandon sent it over to me. Brandon from ZMOC sent it over to me to have a look through, and I have gone through it and made a whole load of comments. And it's now being rewritten, and it will be represented to me to go through and comment on again to say either yes, this is Antares, or what universe is this in? That sort of stuff. So,
and I believe he did.
It's underway at the moment. Is the main thing we can say. There's a couple of other books I think in the line as well. One of them already read through by Mark DeSantis, which is a very Concordy, nanosphere one. Which I was quite impressed with in terms of actually feeling vaguely Antarian. And we'll see what the rest happens. But for now, they're being edited, being read.
Excellent. Didge says, "Back to Ghar, the transport dropper this year."
Never, I think.
No sign of it.
Good answer.
It's a thing of nightmares. I can only imagine. Literally,
it is very strong.
Be able to drop someone more than halfway along the table.
It has a 35-inch turn 1 charge range.
Oh my god.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't want that. No.
Wait, what?
I like to play freeboard.
So if you amplify it, it advances 3 times, which gives you 15 inches. Then you have a amped Ghar assault troop inside of it, which then runs twice. So it advances 15, then runs 20, and shoots you 3 times. So you put 3 pins on something and charge them from 35 inches away.
Yes. What was it? What was it? Not Jay was saying about you being a rules exploiting type.
No, that would be me.
Yeah. I think we came up with the drop because there was a need for a way of actually deploying from orbit, but the studio kind of missed their slot with it, and they've shown no inclination to get back to it. I think it gave them real problems in design. They were trying to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And in the end, we looked at it and we thought, this is going to be really expensive to make, difficult, time-consuming to make, and actually we'd sooner have other things.
Yeah. And as you've pointed out, it's actually quite liable to be easily exploited as well.
Yeah.
Which if Sergey can, he will.
Yeah, that's what I like about wargaming. I like the thought experiment of creating lists. I came from to wargaming from like being a trading card player. So that's like I was a deck builder. So now I'm a list builder.
You're just digging yourself into a hole here, aren't you?
Yeah, it is what it is. It's who I am.
I knew there was something I didn't like about you, Sergey.
If the situation is, it's like, Sergey, now your unit can run out from cover where it's perfectly safe and have a battle to the death, or you can go down and win the game. And he's like, I'm going down.
Every time. No. Of course I am.
No.
Like,
I will eat the dirt and take that win with shame.
Now, is the command crawler the Black Horse of Death or the bombardment crawler?
Oh, can they be twin black horses?
I
Nay.
don't even understand. I don't understand the question.
The combination. It's a combination. That's the real Black Horse of Death, not
He
one
named the
nor t'other. Really.
It's the Black Horse of Death reference I don't get.
It's from our battle reports, Rick.
Is it? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, Kevin
PTSD.
keeps screaming it at me. Yeah.
It's the Black Horse of Death.
Yeah, I ran a list on our first 1250 point game, which we shouldn't have chosen Capture the Drone as the scenario because we didn't get to shoot each other at all. But I ran a list that had 2 separate command crawlers and also bombardment crawler because I just wanted to see how many vehicles I could fit into a list, and it was a lot apparently. And yeah, it was insane.
It's funny because you don't look evil.
Right?
What?
Take
Have
that.
you not seen his hair?
I'll just say, like,
He's got this funny cap on. I can't tell what's going on.
What can I love Gorilla Glue. It's the best glue brand.
He has these 2 horns underneath. That's why it's so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, will there be a city fight expansion? Most of our club's sci-fi terrain is small house and such.
The closest thing we've got to city fight expansion is Drone Scourge, but that was built for fighting inside spaceships or the huge arcologies, which are quite common and throughout and around Antarian space. In terms of fighting through little buildings and that sort of stuff, no, there's no book.
And then where the demolisher rule came in. I think it's our destruction rule.
Yeah.
Blow up walls and things.
Breaching.
Yeah.
To be fair, Drone Scourge has got a lot of the rules in that you would use in that kind of situation, sort of interurban combat or fighting within a building, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Get that and be imaginative, guys.
Yeah.
Breaching weapons are very cool.
There.
I've almost finished this group. Sitting here.
Right, is that it? Have we finished, sir?
Maybe. I think. Is there any other questions you have, Nache? Being a noob about the Ghar?
No,
'Cause you're gonna
I think I definitely want to. If I'm fighting them with what I think I'm going to do with my freeborn is have my freeborn spread out and shoot the hell out of them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. X launchers actually do pretty. Their micro X launchers actually do pretty good against the Ghar, just because it produces so many hits. Eventually, you're going to roll a 10.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, is there anything you would like to add about the Ghar or anything you got going on?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's anything particularly. It's kind of one of my favourite bits of Antares, the Ghar. I think the other one's Boromites, actually, which you were talking about earlier. I think, oddly enough, because when I started writing this game, it was all about Concord and Isaurians. It was about that relationship between the two. But what I found is, as we've been writing, other things take over. So the Freeborn become more of an expression of exploring the universe because they are neutral. They can go anywhere and do anything. And they've got a slightly more adventurous character. And the Ghar have just developed a character of their own as we've gone along.
Yeah.
And which has been quite fun, hasn't it? I mean,
yeah, it's been fun every time a book comes out.
Yeah, I'd like to have done more, but I think Warlord have got distracted. They're very much into anything that floats at the moment.
Yeah,
in case you haven't noticed.
Very true.
I could imagine why. Yeah.
Well, it's very odd, but nonetheless, there you go.
it's very odd.
It is strange. I can't work it out.
Well, awesome. Rick, I'd love for you to come back and talk more Antares if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll have to get a camera. I'll have to get a camera and a haircut and put some clothes on.
You don't need to get a haircut, dude. That's why I'm wearing the hat, man. I haven't gotten a haircut since quarantine began.
See, I told you. Look at that.
Oh my God, he is evil.
He just hides it semi-well underneath the hat.
Yeah, exactly. I can go Super Saiyan if I need to.
I'd say I speak for me and Sergey, Rick. I say and Tim. Really, it's like thank you guys so much. It's such an enjoyable game, and when we were itching to play, I say that hard science fiction thematic nature to it really drew us in, and I don't know. Over the last 2 years, it's been a fantastic game. So keep up the good work.
Yeah, I mean, shit, you guys pretty much have given us our our side gig. We wouldn't be able to make battle reports if you didn't make such an awesome game. So yeah, thanks, guys.
Oh, well, no, you're welcome.
Well,
It's
really
great
pleased
fun
to
being
meet
able to
you.
do something like that, and I wouldn't say making a living at it, but at least it scratch an itch.
And it doesn't matter what game I'll get a little tired of get a little bored with Antares or something, or painting Antares and playing the game and stuff. And Najee will contest to this. I always go back to this game. I always come right back around to it. I would paint some fantasy stuff, play a couple games of fantasy, and then go, you know what? I feel like playing Antares. For some reason, it always goes back to that.
Rich.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice that the gameplay actually sort of engages anyone in that way. So that's one of the things we're really here for. As Rick said, it's great fun to actually produce things which people enjoy.
It is, yeah. And when it comes down to it, I mean, the core system behind Antares, the dice draw system, is something that Alessio came up with. So I just ripped it off, really. So we should be thanking him. Thanks, Alessio.
Thanks, Alessio.
Thank you, Alessio.
There you go.
And thank you, Rick, for the hard swing in the rules. We got one more if you guys don't care. So if I got this right, there is not a new rule book in the works. I've been holding off on getting Antares as I kept hearing rumors of the new edition.
Oh, okay. Well, I would say that the rule book is insufficiently expensive to put you off buying it anyway. But me and Tim have been working on a second edition for a good while now. But it's not on the schedule to be. At least I'm not aware that it's on the schedule to be released. Warlord have had it on the schedule several times, but they keep putting it back in order to do more games about things that float. So
maybe you need to start making the ports of Antares.
I think it's the only way. It's the only way we're actually going to get it out.
A Ghar crabbing vessel.
Yes.
To be honest, guys, I would really, really like to see a Starship game with all of the different
I'd play that.
starships of all of the different various factions.
Funny you should say that. You'll have to get Tim back and have him talk to you about his plans to do a Starship game for Antares.
Oh my god, yeah, I would play that in a heartbeat.
I will absolutely playtest that to death for you.
Yeah, we'll feature that on the channel like every day.
Yes, they are my thing. I really like spaceship games. I've just bought Red Alert, the Richard Borg.
Mm-hmm.
And,
if it's a Command and Colors game, my brother's got it, so we've been playing it quite a bit also.
Yeah, and the questions are coming now.
Right?
Will the old expansions be compatible with the upcoming edition?
Yes, I think that's the case. We were quite careful about that. I think some of the new army list is a slightly different format and might not quite be compatible with the existing army list. But
all the backgrounds certainly compatible in the new edition, and to be honest, a lot of the rules are compatible with the new edition as well.
Yes,
but as I say, the new editions, there's no plan for it to be out this year, is there?
No,
and I'm not aware that it's on the schedule for next year, which it would be if it was going to be released. The studio haven't started work on it yet.
It's all them damn boats.
It's all them damn boats. I mean, me and Tim have been working on it, and we've got the manuscript pretty much polished up.
Yeah.
There's not, and it's been that way for a good while, isn't it? So.
It's the coronavirus. Really, I have to say here. I know it sounds like a standard excuse, but the coronavirus really scuppered the release.
Scuppered boats, see.
It just put so many obstacles in the way.
Yeah.
Well, the studio's not worked at all. They've been furloughed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still furloughed at the moment, so.
I work in the restaurant industry, so I feel your pain. It is. It affects many aspects of business.
Yep.
Yeah. We haven't and I think Warlords weathered the lockdown quite well because, well, the reason why Games Workshop is doing so well at the moment. People have said, well, it gives me a chance to paint up an army. Oh,
Yep.
I need some more. So I think we've done quite well from that perspective. But obviously, there's still loads of retailers who we don't know how they're going to survive. The poor blighters have, I think, probably struggled a bit during the lockdown. So we have to see what happens before we go anywhere else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it makes it all a bit unpredictable, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I think the long and the short of this is I wouldn't wait for the second edition.
No.
It's well worth getting the existing one because you will have the opportunity to play quite a bit of Antares before the second edition comes out.
If you are getting that rule book, I would definitely recommend getting the Strike on Ghar 9 and buying it from Warlords' website, because we just talked to Warlords about this. And if you buy it from their website, it's very likely that it'll come with the hardback rule book. So you're paying $50 for like $150 worth of stuff, and use our affiliate link over on our channel. So the Tabletop Warlords get a small commission.
Yay! I like this.
We had a viewer that got one of the Strike on Ghar 9s with the old small rule book. So that's I think that's where they came from. So
yeah, they said something along the lines of, I think they just stopped putting the short. They didn't have the paperback, so they just were like, throw in the hardback.
Yeah. So if you order it, so if you're buying it from like a brick and mortar store, weigh it in your hands, because it might be the old edition.
To support local.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Support your FLG.
That big rule book, I have 2 or 3 of them, and I will tell you that I can't find the other 2. I've got the one. There's so much fluff in there. There's so much background in there alone that it'd be worth it. So
yeah, there's an awful lot of background in it, and we've tried to keep a fair amount of background even in the second edition as well. And Rick's expanded some of the background, the timeline as well. It's but it's well worth. I keep telling anybody who wants to write for Antares to just read the rule book.
Right.
I do that before every episode. I reread all the fluff for the faction that we're about to talk about, so I don't say something stupid.
Yeah, my problem is because I remember all the versions of the fluff that I kind of toyed with putting in, but didn't quite put in, and as always with these things. Yeah.
Well, Rick, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. Tim, you as well, sir. Keep writing. What you write is amazing. Your stories, the Drone Scourge story, I just reread that this morning because I was just getting the rule books out, trying to find the Ghar stuff, and I just reread it, and it's totally brilliant. It's wonderful writing. It's good background material. Sergey, Kevin, thanks, guys. Always a pleasure for you guys being on. Nache, of course.
Thanks for having us on. It's a pleasure.
Noob. Nache, thanks, man, for joining me as well. And thank you guys for listening. We got 17 people viewing right now and watching right now. So thank you guys for sure for all the questions that you've put in there for Rick and picking his brain. And we'll have Rick on back on sometime to talk about, I don't know, whatever Rick wants to talk about. We'll let him pick. We'll let him choose.
Really?
No, we're in trouble. It's going to be baby prawns or something.
Prawns. Cherry shrimp.
Yes.
Yeah,
is that what they're called?
Yeah.
Shrimp. Yeah.
Cherry shrimp. We've got a lot of those.
Well, anyway, guys, as I always say, last but not least, from me to you, ta-ta, and we will catch you in our next Antares Adventures pod.